The first thing Ser Loras Tyrell smelled was wine. It hung in the air like a sweet lie, spilled across rushes, soaked into oak, smeared on lips that had been laughing a heartbeat ago. Beneath it came the sharper tang of fear, the metallic whisper of drawn steel, and then, too late for anyone to pretend otherwise, the stink of treachery laid bare. He hit the threshold at a run, boots slipping on rushes slick with drink. A reachman beside him took a bolt in the throat before he fully understood the hall had changed. The man's hands clawed at his neck, and the sound he made was wet and small. Loras did not stop. Stopping was for men who could afford to lose time. "Bar the doors!" A Frey voice screamed from somewhere near the side passage. A second bolt snapped past Loras's shoulder and struck a Frey at the dais, punching through his cheek and pinning him to a wooden post. The man's scream cut off into a gurgle. Confusion rippled like a thrown net, tangling killers and victims together. Loras drove forward, sword up, eyes locked on the men at the main doors. Iron bars gleamed in their hands, halfway into their sockets. Halfway was everything. Halfway meant the trap had teeth but no bite yet. "Ser Loras Tyrell," someone bellowed, disbelief in the words. Robb Stark had risen from the high table with the abrupt motion of a wolf cornered. His crown looked wrong in the firelight. Too bright, too thin for what he'd carried. His sword flashed free, and for a heartbeat the hall saw what the North had followed. A young king who could still be sudden violence. Catelyn Stark stood beside him, dagger in hand, eyes hard as hammered iron. Her face did not show surprise. It showed recognition, as if she had always known salvation, if it came at all, would come in armor, late and screaming. Walder Frey's mouth opened wide enough to swallow the hall. "What is this?" he shrieked, spittle flying. "This is my..." A reach spear took a Frey guard under the ribs before Walder could finish. The guard folded, knocked into the high table, sending cups tumbling like dice. Walder Frey's eyes bulged. The old man's hands scrabbled at the table edge, trying to pull himself back into control of a world that had just slipped. Roose Bolton sat very still. Loras saw him in the same instant he saw the minstrels, because calm was a kind of signal. Bolton's pale eyes moved, not with panic, but calculation. Measuring exits, counting men, weighing the new shape of the night. The minstrels tore instruments apart like masks, crossbows hidden within the hollow of fiddles and under harp frames. A bowstring twanged. The sound was wrong, not music but murder. Another bolt shot, this one true, and a Stark man at Robb's side jerked hard, the bolt sprouting from his chest like an obscene flower. Robb's sword came up on instinct, too late to save the man, but not too late to swear the hall would pay. "To me!" Robb Stark roared, voice cracking through chaos. "Northmen, to me!" Men answered. Some were close enough to reach him. Others were already down, faces in spilled wine, blood seeping between fingers. Ser Loras Tyrell closed the last steps to the main doors in 3 strides. A Frey man shoved the iron bar into place. Loras's sword cut down, shearing fingers and bar together. The man screamed, fell back, clutching a hand that no longer held what it should. Another Frey lunged with a knife. Loras caught the blade on his guard and drove his pommel into the man's mouth, feeling teeth crack through the leather of his glove. "Keep them open!" he shouted over his shoulder to his knights pouring in. "Keep them open or we all die in here." A reachman, young, face pale, threw himself against the door, bracing it with his shoulder while another jammed a spear haft into the bar socket, blocking it from sliding fully. A third man died for it, bolt through his eye, but the spear stayed. Ser Garland Tyrell's banner unfurled behind Loras like a sunrise in a burning room. The golden rose blazed against green cloth, and men saw it and understood. This was not a brawl between drunk lords. This was House Tyrell committing steel to a decision. The hall shook as another door banged inward. Randyll Tarley's men coming in from a side passage, faces set in grim discipline. They moved in a line, not a flood, shields up, spears bristling. Crossbow bolts thudded into oak and leather, some punching through, some skittering off, each impact like a hammer stroke. "Gallery!" Randyll Tarly barked. "Clear the gallery!" His men angled left, charging toward the raised musicians' platform. The minstrels tried to reload, hands trembling now, their certainty broken. A Tarly spear took one in the gut. The man dropped his crossbow and clutched himself, falling over his own spilled strings. Catelyn Stark saw an opening, a moment when Walder Frey's guards were distracted and his chair was suddenly too exposed. She moved like a woman who had buried too many children in her mind and refused to bury another in truth. She stepped up onto the dais, skirt snagging on a fallen cup, and grabbed Walder Frey by the collar. The old man wheezed, eyes rolling. Catelyn's dagger pressed under his chin, biting into the soft skin there. "Call them OFF," she hissed into his ear. "Call them off or I open your throat and let your songs end in blood." Walder Frey's hands fluttered uselessly, trying to push her away, but the knife had found something older than his pride. Fear. Roose Bolton finally stood. He did not shout. He did not draw attention. He simply shifted his weight, turning his body so he could move toward Robb Stark through the crush. Loras saw him, and for an instant he felt the certainty of Olenna Tyrell's warning settle into bone. The true killer did not always wear the mask of a killer. "Robb Stark!" Loras shouted, but the hall swallowed the words. Robb Stark was already moving, blade cutting down a Frey who had lunged too close. His breath came in sharp bursts, eyes wild with the realization that he had been one heartbeat from dying unarmed with wine on his lips. A bolt flew from the gallery, low, meant for Robb's side. Ser Loras Tyrell threw himself without thinking, sword down, shoulder turning. The bolt struck his armor and skidded off with a screech that rang in his teeth. Pain flared hot anyway, as if the metal had remembered what it meant to be pierced. He did not stop. He drove forward again, toward Robb Stark, toward Roose Bolton's pale stillness, toward the knife that was trying to find a king's heart in the middle of a wedding feast. Outside, the yard became a storm. Frey men ran with no sense of formation, their commands turning into screams as steel met steel in the torchlit mud. A half-drunk archer tried to notch an arrow and lost his fingers to a reach sword before he could draw. A stable boy fell beneath hooves that did not see him. Torches were knocked from brackets, rolling on the ground like fallen stars, setting straw to smolder. Grey wind's howl rose from somewhere deep in the castle. Raw, furious, the sound of an animal that had smelled death coming and been caged for it. Then the kennel door exploded inward. The dire wolf burst into the yard like a nightmare with fur and fangs. He was bigger than any hound of Frey had ever seen, shoulders rolling, teeth bared, eyes bright with a terrible intelligence. He hit the first man he reached and took the man's throat in one snap. Blood sprayed hot across Grey Wind's muzzle. The man's body dropped, twitching. Men shouted and stumbled back, some dropping swords as if steel could not protect against something so primal. Grey Wind turned, found another throat, and tore it open. The wolf did not fight like a beast. He fought like loyalty made flesh. A Stark man. Daisy Mormont's cousin, perhaps, or some nameless Northman with frozen eyes. Saw the wolf and screamed with hope instead of fear. "Grey Wind!" he roared, and it was a rallying cry as strong as any banner. Tyrell cavalry punched into the courtyard through the outer gate in a wedge, Ser Garland Tyrell at the fore, his horses barding splattered with mud. He did not have Loras's reckless speed. He had something worse for enemies, patience. He cut left, then right, choosing targets that broke Frey lines instead of feeding his pride. "Gatehouse!" he shouted. "Take the gatehouse!" Randyll Tarly's men moved like a machine in the midst of panic. They formed a shield wall across the yard's center, separating Frey soldiers from the great hall doors, giving the Stark space to breathe and the Tyrell space to push. Arrows thudded into shields. A man grunted and fell. The line stepped over him without breaking. A Frey captain, face slick with sweat and terror, tried to rally his men at the gatehouse stairs. "Hold!" he shrieked. "Hold, or Lord Walder!" Grey Wind hit him from the side. The direwolf's momentum carried both of them up the first step before the man toppled backward. Throat ripped out. His men broke like clay. Stark bannermen, wolves on gray cloth, appeared near the gatehouse, men who had been scattered now gathering under something familiar. A bearded man with a scar down his cheek shoved a spear into a Frey's belly and yelled, "For the king in the north!" The words answered themselves. Men took them up. The yard filled with it, a chant rolling through chaos like thunder. For a moment, the Freys' trap became their own cage. Their men were inside the walls, and now the walls contained not helpless guests, but wolves and roses and disciplined steel. A door in the far tower slammed open, and more Frey soldiers poured out, crossbows raised, trying to aim into the yard. Ser Loras Tyrell saw it, angled his horse, and charged. He lifted his sword and cut down the first crossbowman before the man's bolt could leave the string. The second bolt flew too late, striking a horse's neck. The animal screamed and reared, throwing its rider. The rider hit the mud hard, breath knocked from him. Ser Loras Tyrell dismounted in one fluid motion and hauled the man up by his collar. "Breathe," he said, as if scolding a child. Then he turned and drove his sword into the crossbowman's chest. Gray wind leapt again, landing on the tower steps, snarling up at men who suddenly found themselves staring into the mouth of something that did not bargain. Inside the hall, steel rang louder, desperate. Outside, the yard answered with its own violence. And in the narrow places of stone and wood between the towers, Roose Bolton searched for his moment like a leech seeking blood. Roose Bolton did not run. He moved as if he had all the time in the world, sliding through bodies and overturned benches, letting louder men draw attention. His face stayed smooth, almost bored, but his eyes never stopped measuring. He slipped from the great hall through a side arch as Frey men screamed and died around him. The corridor beyond smelled of damp stone and old smoke from a hearth that had not been cleaned. Torches guttered, throwing uneven light across Bolton's pale features, making him look even less alive. Robb Stark had been dragged off the dais by his guard in the crush, forced toward the same passage by the tide of panicked men. His sword was up, his breathing harsh, hair damp with sweat. A cut along his forearm bled freely where a bolt had grazed him. He looked like what he was, young, furious, and suddenly aware that kings died like everyone else. Bolton's dagger appeared in his hand like an extension of thought, small and dark. He advanced with the quiet certainty of a man who had already decided how history would remember tonight. "Your Grace," Roose Bolton said softly, and his voice held the mockery of courtesy. "I fear you have offended your hosts." Robb's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" he demanded, and there was disbelief in it, because some betrayals were still too large to fit inside the mind. Roose Bolton's smile was barely there. "What I must." He lunged. Robb's sword came down in a hard parry, steel ringing against steel. The dagger skittered off the blade, sparks flying. Bolton's other hand snapped out, trying to grab Robb's wrist, to pull him in close where a dagger meant more than a sword. Robb twisted, boots slipping on spilled wine tracked into the corridor. He shoved Bolton back with his shoulder and swung again, blade whistling past Bolton's ribs. Bolton moved with an unnerving lack of urgency, as if he could afford to be almost too slow. Then a third figure slammed into the corridor like a battering ram. Ser Loras Tyrell came in with his sword already moving, green cloak torn, breath steady. He did not shout. He did not announce himself. He simply stepped between the Wolf King and the Leech Lord and cut. Bolton jerked back. The edge of Garland's blade kissed Bolton's sleeve and sliced cloth. A thin line of blood appeared on Bolton's forearm, bright against pale skin. Roose Bolton looked at it with mild interest, as if blood were something he observed in others, not himself. "Lord Roose Bolton," Ser Loras Tyrell said, voice calm, "put down the knife." Bolton's eyes flicked to Garland's banner pin, the rose in gold. Understanding passed through him, cold and swift. "Tyrell," he murmured. "Interesting. You plan to murder a king at a wedding," Garland replied. "There are names for that." Roose Bolton's lips curved faintly. Names do not matter. Power does. He feinted toward Robb again, dagger flashing, but Garland's sword intercepted, forcing Bolton back down the corridor. Robb Stark recovered his footing and stepped in, swinging low, trying to cut Bolton's legs out. Bolton hopped back, graceful, and for the first time his calm cracked into irritation. Bolton turned his head slightly, listening. From the hall came the sound of a horn and then the harsher, closer sounds of men dying. From the yard came Grey Wind's howl. The twins were no longer controlled chaos. They were a collapsing structure. Roose Bolton weighed it all in a heartbeat. He was not a man who gambled when the table turned against him. He threw a small pouch to the floor between them. It burst, fine powder blooming in the torchlight, stinging eyes, clouding air. Robb coughed, blinking hard. Ser Loras Tyrell cursed, bringing his cloak up over his mouth. Bolton used the moment like a key. He slipped through a narrow servant door, vanishing into the castle's veins. After him, Robb Stark rasped, voice raw. Ser Loras Tyrell took a step, but his eyes, watering, caught something on the floor where Bolton had stood. A strip of parchment, dropped or tossed, the wax seal half-cracked. Garland snatched it up, eyes narrowing through tears. A lion pressed into red wax. Roose Bolton was already gone, but his proof remained, like rot left behind after a snake slid away. Robb Stark's breathing slowed as the powder cleared. He stared at the torn seal, then at Ser Loras Tyrell. "Bolton," he said, and the word was no longer disbelief. It was a vow. Ser Loras Tyrell nodded once. "He won't get far," he said, though he did not sound certain. Outside, the war in the yard surged louder. Inside, Catelyn Stark's knife pressed harder under Walder Frey's chin, and the old man began to whimper. Catelyn Stark had not planned to become the blade that held the room together. It happened because she saw what men refused to see until it was too late. That fear was sometimes the only language traitors understood. Walder Frey was old, but age did not make a man harmless. His voice had summoned death into the hall like a servant. His smile had been the latch on the trap. Now his smile was gone. Catelyn's arm locked around Walder's chest, pulling him tight against her. Her dagger pressed into the soft skin beneath his jaw, and she felt his pulse there, fluttering like a trapped bird. The old man wheezed, hands scrabbling at her forearm. "Stop them," she whispered into his ear, and her voice was cold enough to freeze the air. "Stop them now, or I swear by every god you've ever lied to, I will cut you open from throat to belly and let your sons watch you die." Walder Frey made a sound that might have been a laugh if it wasn't so thin. You wouldn't," he gasped. "Lady Catelyn, be reasonable." "Reasonable." Catelyn's eyes flicked over the hall, over Stark men bleeding on rushes, over Reach Knights cutting their way toward the gallery, over Frey crossbow bolts lodged in walls like accusations. "This is your reason. This is your hospitality." A Frey lord, one of Walder's sons, broad and sweating, raised a sword as if to rush her. Ser Loras Tyrell turned, and his blade came up like a warning. "Take one step," Loras said, voice harsh with exertion, "and I'll kill you before you reach her." The Frey hesitated. The hall had expected victims who folded. It had not expected a rose knight in green enamel telling them their blood was cheap. Robb Stark pushed through bodies and broken benches, sword dripping. His face was pale under sweat, but his eyes burned. He came close enough that Walder Frey's breath hit him. "Tell them to stop," Robb said. "Now." Walder's eyes darted. It's too late," he croaked. "Once it begins, once the doors." Ser Loras Tyrell slammed the flat of his blade onto the high table, rattling cups and plates. The sound cracked through the hall like a whip. "It can stop," he snarled. "You started it, old man. You can end it." Walder Frey's face contorted with hatred and fear tangled together. "You think you can just walk in here and—" Catelyn's dagger pressed harder, drawing a thin line of blood. Walder's words died in his throat. His hands clawed at her arm again, and for the first time she felt the old man's true terror. Not of death, but of dying powerless. "Call them off," Catelyn repeated, and there was no pleading in it, only inevitability. Walder Frey swallowed. His voice came out hoarse. "Stop," he croaked, turning his head as much as her grip allowed. "Stop, you fools." Some Freys heard. Some did not. Some had never intended to stop. But in the gallery, Randyll Tarly's men were already there, shields up, spears thrusting. A minstrel screamed as a spear haft cracked his jaw. Crossbows clattered to the wooden boards. Another man tried to jump from the platform into the hall. A Tarly soldier caught him midair and slammed him down, snapping his arm. Randyll Tarly himself mounted the steps, sword in hand, eyes like iron. "Drop them," he commanded, voice flat. "Drop them and live." A minstrel, face slick with sweat, stared down at the hall, at Walder Frey bleeding under Catelyn Stark's knife, at Reach banners blazing, at Frey men dying on rushes, and his hands began to shake. His crossbow slid from his grip and hit the floor with a heavy thud. Then another dropped. Then another. Not all. Never all. But enough. Robb Stark watched it happen and felt a strange, sick relief crawl up his spine. He was alive. His mother was alive. The night could still be turned, if only by force. He leaned close to Walder Frey, and his voice was low. "You guessed right," he said. "I will make the realm remember your name for it." Walder Frey's eyes glittered with hatred. "The realm forgets," he spat weakly. Robb Stark's smile was not kind. Not this. Outside, gray wind howled again, and the sound carried into the hall like a promise. The gallery smelled of sweat and cheap perfume, and beneath it, the faint odor of oil from crossbow mechanisms that had been handled too often for music. Randyll Tarly's boots thudded on the boards as he stepped among scattered instruments, strings snapping underfoot like dead spiders. Men knelt in the corner, hands bound behind their backs with torn cloak cords. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, lips moving in frantic prayers. One had a harp bruise across his cheek where a shield rim had struck him. Another had blood on his hands not from wounds, but from the bodies he had meant to make. "Names," Randyll Tarly said. A man with a thin beard swallowed. We're singers," he stammered, and the lie sounded pathetic even to him. Randyll's sword tip lifted the man's chin. "You sing with crossbows," he said. "Try again." The man's eyes flicked to the hall below, to the chaos turning slowly into control. "We were paid," he whispered. "Paid to play a song and kill a king," Ser Loras Tyrell finished, stepping into the gallery with his cloak torn and his sword still wet. His eyes were sharp despite the powder that had stung them. In his hand was the torn parchment he had snatched from the corridor. Lion wax cracked. Randyll Tarly's gaze flicked to it. "Lannister," he said. "Ser Loras Tyrell Navid." "And Bolton," he replied softly. "Roose Bolton tried for Robb Stark in the corridor. He fled. He dropped this." Below, a howl of pain rose from the hall as someone found their death late. Randyll Tarly's face did not change. War did not surprise him. Treachery disgusted him, but it did not shock. He crouched and picked up a dropped purse from among the broken fiddles. He loosened it and spilled its contents into his palm. Gold coins winked in torchlight. Lannister lions stamped into metal. "Look at that," Randyll murmured. "A song paid in lions." A captured man began to sob. "We didn't know," he babbled. "We were told it was justice, told the Wolf King would be dead by morning anyway, told it would end the war." Ser Loras Tyrell's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Wars do not end when you butcher men at weddings," he said. "They only change shape." Randyll Tarly straightened and looked down into the hall. Catelyn Stark still held Walder Frey in a knife's embrace. Robb Stark stood near the dais, sword ready, chest heaving. Ser Loras Tyrell moved through the crowd like a green flame, cutting down those who still reached for hidden knives or crossbows. Tyrell men and Stark men began to find each other, recognize each other, fall into loose ranks. The Freys, who had planned certainty, now had only chaos. Randyll lifted his voice, and it carried without needing to be loud. "Enough," he called. "Drop your weapons." Some did. Those who did not were cut down. A Frey man tried to crawl toward a side door, dragging a crossbow. Ser Loras Tyrell stepped on the weapon, pinning it to the floor, then drove his sword into the man's shoulder with a swift, brutal motion. The man screamed and dropped the crossbow. Loras yanked his blade free and turned, scanning again, always scanning, as if he could still feel doors trying to close. On the gallery, Randyll Tarly gestured to his men. "Take them," he ordered. "Bind them. I want every purse, every letter, every seal. If Tywin Lannister bought this night, I want his fingerprints in my hands." Ser Garland Tyrell held the torn parchment tighter. He felt suddenly the weight of it not as paper but as a weapon. Proof. Down below, Robb Stark looked up at the gallery as if he could sense what had been found. Ser Garland Tyrell met his gaze and nodded once. The Wolf King understood. And somewhere in the castle's underways, Roose Bolton slid through shadows toward a hidden exit, listening to the sounds of his plan dying behind him, already thinking of the next move. The bridge was the throat, and the Freys tried to choke it. They shoved a wagon sideways at the ramp, men heaving with grunts, wheels scraping stone. A line of spearmen formed behind it, crossbows raising over shoulders. Torches lined the parapet, their flames snapping in the wind off the river. Ser Loras Tyrell burst out from the great hall doors into the yard, breath steaming, armor smeared with wine and blood. His eyes went straight to the bridge, to the wagon barricade, to the men trying to close the twins from within. "No," he snarled, as if the word alone could stop them. Ser Garland Tyrell appeared on horseback beside him, face set. "If they hold the bridge," he said, "they can split us. They can trap Robb Stark's men on one side and cut them apart. And if they trap us," Loras answered, "they can still finish what they started." Robb Stark came into the yard behind a cluster of battered Northmen, sword still in hand, crown askew. He looked at the bridge and understood instantly. The twins were not one castle. They were two, and between them, a narrow strip of stone where men could die in piles. "With me!" Robb shouted, mounting a horse shoved toward him by a Stark rider. He swung into the saddle with the grim ease of a man who had ridden into battles since boyhood. Gray wind flashed through the yard like a shadow, bounding up the bridge ramp before anyone could stop him. The direwolf's paws hit stone, claws scraping, and he barreled straight toward the wagon as if it were prey. A crossbow bolt snapped out. It struck Gray Wind's flank and skittered off fur and muscle, shallow but painful. The wolf snarled, deep, terrible, and leapt onto the wagon itself, jaws closing around the throat of the nearest spearman. The man screamed once, then only blood spoke. That broke the Freys more than any cavalry charge could. Men did not like wolves on narrow bridges. Ser Loras Tyrell spurred forward, horse pounding up the ramp. Tyrell knights followed in a wedge, green cloaks streaming. The first bolts flew. One hit a Tyrell rider in the shoulder, spinning him in the saddle. Another struck a horse's chest and sent the animal collapsing, blocking the ramp for a heartbeat. Loras did not slow. He rose in the stirrups and drove his sword down into the neck of a Frey spearman who had leaned too far over the wagon to aim. The man toppled backward, knocking another down with him. The wagon shuddered as bodies hit it. Robb Stark's Northmen surged behind the Tyrell wedge, spears thrusting, swords hacking. The bridge became a crush of men and metal, torches flaring as elbows knocked them, flames licking at cloaks. A Frey captain screamed orders that no one heard. He tried to push the wagon harder into place, but Gray Wind was on it, tearing at hands, snarling, eyes wild. The captain's sword came down toward the wolf. Gray Wind snapped up and took the captain's forearm, ripping it nearly free. The man's scream was drowned by the roar of battle. Ser Garland Tyrell rode up alongside Loras, and together they hit the wagon like hammers. Garland's sword cut down a crossbowman aiming over the top. Loras shoved his horse into the wagon's side, pushing with brute force while Northmen shoved from behind. The wagon's wheels squealed. Stones scraped. The barricade shifted. A Frey man stabbed downward from the wagon bed with a spear. The spearhead glanced off Loras's shoulder plate, jarring him. Pain flared, bright. He hissed, teeth bared, and drove his sword up into the man's gut. The man folded over the wagon edge, blood pouring like spilled wine. "Push!" Loras roared. Men pushed. The wagon finally gave, rolling sideways, opening a gap just wide enough for a horse. Ser Loras Tyrell drove through first, cutting left, clearing space. Robb Stark followed, sword raised, face set like stone. Northmen poured after him, shouting, the bridge trembling under their weight. On the far side, Frey men broke and ran toward the second tower's yard, some throwing weapons aside. They had wanted a closed hall and helpless guests. Instead, they had opened their own throat to wolves and roses. As the last Frey line crumbled, Ser Loras Tyrell looked down at the river churning black beneath torchlight and felt a cold thought settle into him. Roose Bolton had fled. The leash had slipped away while the castle burned with his betrayal. The night had been saved. The war had not. The chamber they found was small and bare, meant for a lesser lord or a visiting captain, not a king. That suited Robb Stark fine. Kingship felt less like a throne and more like a cage tonight. He sat on a wooden chair with his crown set aside on a table, as if even iron could not be trusted. His shirt was torn at the forearm where the bolt had grazed him. The maester pressed linen and wine-soaked cloth to it, muttering about infection as if infection were the worst thing that could happen to a king. Catelyn Stark stood behind him, hands still stained faintly red, her face carved into something harder than grief. The dagger she'd held to Walder Frey's throat was now on the table, its blade wiped clean but not forgotten. Ser Loras Tyrell leaned against the wall, breathing through pain. There was a bruise blooming under his shoulder plate where a bolt had struck, and his knuckles were split from striking men who would not die quickly enough. He looked less like the Knight of Flowers and more like what a knight truly was. A man who had survived because he was faster than death. Ser Loras Tyrell stood by the table with a bundle of parchment and seals, his calm unmarred. He laid the letters down as if laying out bones. Edmure Tully sat on the bed, face bruised, lips split. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the delayed tremor of realizing how close he'd come to dying with wedding wine on his tongue. Near the wall, Rosalind Frey, Edmure's bride, stood with her arms wrapped around herself, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. She looked too young for the things her family had done around her. Robb Stark's eyes lifted to Loras. "Why?" he asked. The question was not crude. It was heavy. Why had the Tyrells come? Why had roses bled for wolves? Why had a house tied to the Iron Throne chosen this moment to intervene?
Ser Loras Tyrell straten, wincing.
Because Lady Olenna Tyrell did not believe Lord Walder Frey's forgiveness, he said. And because my grandmother said the lions would eat us all if they grew too fat. Robb's mouth tightened. You're allied to the lions. Not by love, Ser Loras Tyrell said quietly. By necessity. Necessity changes. Catelyn Stark's eyes narrowed. My husband died in King's Landing under necessity, she said. My son will not trust easily. Ser Loras Tyrell met her gaze without flinching. He shouldn't, he said. Trust is what Frey tried to murder tonight. Ser Loras Tyrell lifted a letter and turned it so Robb could see the broken wax seal. Lion pressed into red. This was dropped by Roose Bolton, he said. And in the gallery we found Lannister gold on the men dressed as minstrels. Edmure's face drained. Roose, he rasped. Robb's hand clenched on the chair arm. He tried for me, Robb said, voice flat. In the corridor. He fled. Catelyn's breath caught, then steadied into something cold. He will go north, she said at once. To the Dreadfort, to Winterfell's ashes. He will claim what he can. Robb's jaw tightened. He won't have it. Ser Loras Tyrell stepped forward, careful with his bruised shoulder. He may already have a head start, he said. We can pursue, but if we scatter in anger, we give the Lannisters time. We give Walder Frey's surviving sons time to gather other traitors. Robb Stark's eyes flicked to Rosalind Frey, weeping silently. And what of her? He asked. What of the girl who was put in my uncle's bed as bait? Rosalind flinched, as if the words struck her. Edmure Tully looked up, anger flashing through shock. She didn't know, he snapped. I swear it. Catelyn Stark studied Rosalind for a long moment, then looked away as if looking might crack something inside her. Perhaps she didn't, she said. Perhaps she did. It hardly matters. Her house did. Robb Stark's gaze returned to Ser Loras Tyrell. If you're here, he said slowly, then the Reach has chosen a side. Ser Loras Tyrell did not answer immediately. He thought of Marjorie in King's Landing, smiling at a boy king with a crossbow. He thought of Olenna, old and sharp, making choices like cuts. He thought of Tywin Lannister's cold patience. The Reach has chosen survival, he said at last. And tonight, survival meant you living. Robb Stark exhaled, a harsh sound. Then we hold the twins, he said. We hold it with Tyrell steel and Stark blood, and we send ravens to every river lord who still breathes. Walder Frey will answer for this. Catelyn Stark's eyes flicked to the door. And what of Littlefinger? She murmured, remembering whispers, remembering letters with two sweet smiles behind them.
Se garlant tireis gaza sharpanat.
Lady Olenna warned us, he said. She believes Peter Baelish's hands are in this. Robb Stark looked at the lion seal again. Then at the broken instruments, the idea of music turned into murder. Then we will tear those hands off, he said, and his voice was a promise. Outside the chamber, the twins were quieter now. Men groaned, horses whinnied. Torches hissed in the damp. The castle, which had been built to control a crossing, had become a monument to betrayal, and to the fact that betrayal, once exposed, could be hunted. Walder Frey looked smaller when he could not hide behind his hall. Bound in a chair with rope biting into his wrists, his fine clothes stained with wine and sweat, the Lord of the Crossing was reduced to what he had always been beneath his pride. An old man with too many sons and not enough honor. His rings still gleamed in candlelight, gaudy things that seemed obscene now, like jewelry on a corpse. Ser Loras Tyrell stood over him with a sword angled down, point hovering near Walder's chest without touching. He did not need to touch. The threat was the air itself. Catelyn Stark sat in the shadow of the wall, spine straight, eyes fixed on Walder Frey with the cold concentration of a mother who had watched the world murder her family piece by piece. She did not speak. Her silence was heavier than any shout. Ser Garland Tyrell laid evidence on the table like a priest laying out relics. Letters with broken seals, purses of lion-stamped gold, a strip of cloth cut from a minstrel's tunic with a hidden pocket sewn for bolts. A Frey son, one of the broad ones, bruised and bleeding, knelt on the floor, hands bound, staring at the evidence as if it were a curse. Walder Frey licked his lips. This is outrageous, he wheezed. I was attacked. My home violated. Ser Loras Tyrell's sword tip dipped a fraction, and Walder Frey's words stumbled. Your home was a slaughterhouse, Loras said, voice low, and you were the butcher. Walder's eyes flashed with a stubborn fury. They were rebels, he hissed. Traitors. The king. Robb Stark entered then, stepping into candlelight like a shadow given shape. He did not wear his crown. He did not need it. His face was pale, but his eyes burned. Which king? Robb asked quietly. Walder Frey swallowed. His gaze darted toward the door as if seeking rescue. There was none. Frey men were disarmed. Many dead, others held. Tyrell steel stood in the corridors. Stark men guarded the stairs. The twins, his precious crossing, had become his cage. Walder's voice came out thin. The king in King's Landing, he muttered. Robb Stark stepped closer to the table, looked at the lion seals. Tywin Lannister, he said. He bought you. Walder Frey spat. Bought? He rasped. He offered justice. He offered safety. He offered that my house would not be ground into dust when you lost. You chose dust anyway, Catelyn Stark said suddenly, and her voice cut through the room like a blade. Walder flinched at the sound of her speaking, as if he had forgotten she could. You broke guest right, she continued, words cold and measured. You invited men beneath your roof and planned to murder them for coin. There is no god who will shelter you from what comes. Walder's mouth twisted. Gods, he sneered weakly. Where were your gods when your husband lost his head? Catelyn Stark's eyes did not change. Watching, she said. Remembering. Ser Loras Tyrell picked up the torn strip of parchment Roose Bolton had dropped, holding the cracked lion seal where candlelight could catch it. And Roose Bolton, he said. He was your partner. Walder Frey's gaze flicked away too fast. That was answer enough. Robb Stark's hand slammed onto the table, making coins jump. Where did he go? He demanded. Walder swallowed, eyes wide. I don't. Ser Loras Tyrell's sword tip pressed into Walder's tunic, just enough to dent fabric. You do, Loras said. You know which door he used. Walder's breath hitched. His pride tried to rise and died again under the weight of steel and consequence. River Gate, he whispered. The lower passage. He left when the fighting started. I thought he'd finish it. You thought you'd watch a king die, Robb Stark said, voice like iron. And you thought no one would live to speak of it. Walder's eyes glittered with spite and fear. If you kill me, he rasped, you lose the crossing. You lose the river. You lose. We will keep the crossing, Ser Loras Tyrell said calmly. We have the men. We have the towers. Your sons will obey or they will die. A Frey son on the floor began to sob. Another stared, jaw clenched, hatred simmering under humiliation. Robb Stark looked at Walder Frey for a long moment. The room waited for the shape of justice. Then Robb spoke, voice steady. You will sign, he said. You will yield the twins. You will send ravens to every Frey holdfast ordering them to stand down. And you will remain alive until the realm hears what you did. You wanted songs, Walder Frey. You will have them. Walder's mouth opened, then closed. The thought of being made into a lesson terrified him more than death. Catelyn Stark's gaze never left his throat. And if he refuses? She asked softly. Robb Stark's eyes did not flicker. Then my mother will finish what she began, he said. Walder Frey's face crumpled into something like pleading. I'll sign, he whispered. I'll sign. Ser Loras Tyrell exhaled slowly, the tension in him easing only slightly. They had stopped the slaughter. They had seized the twins. They had proof in hand. But somewhere beyond these walls, Roose Bolton ran toward the north with a leech's patience, and Tywin Lannister sat in King's Landing with a lion's calm. The war, robbed of its neat ending, would now become something uglier. By dawn, the twins belonged to wolves and roses, not by right, not by decree, by the simplest law the realm had ever obeyed, the law of whoever held the gates and the bridge when the fighting stopped. The war council gathered in a chamber that smelled of wet stone and burnt tallow. A long table was covered in a map of the Riverlands, corners pinned with daggers. Wax seals, broken and unbroken, lay scattered like shed skins. Ravens rustled in cages, black eyes watching the humans with the same patience as crows. Robb Stark stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to the elbow, wound bound. He looked older than he had the day before. Betrayal aged men faster than winter. Catelyn Stark stood to his left, quiet, gaze fixed on the map as if she could find her lost children hidden among the inked rivers. Brynden Tully, Blackfish, had arrived in the small hours, having sensed danger and fled the hall before the trap could close, only to return to find the twins in chaos and then in new hands. His eyes were sharp, mouth set in a permanent line of disapproval. Ser Loras Tyrell stood opposite Robb, bruised and restless, while Ser Loras Tyrell watched with calm focus. Randyll Tarly leaned over the map like a stern tutor, pointing with a dagger tip. Roose Bolton will go north, Brynden Tully said, voice rough. He'll try to seize what he can. If he reaches the Dreadfort and gathers his men, he becomes harder to pull out. Robb Stark's hand tightened on the table edge. I will not leave him behind, he said. And if you chase him, Randyll Tarly replied, Tywin Lannister breathes easier. He will use the time. He will send armies. He will paint you as butcher and traitor and claim you attacked loyal Freys.
Ser Loras Tyrell ja ho clanxa.
He'll do that anyway, he said. Ser Garland Tyrell tapped the lion-sealed letters. But now we can show the realm what truth looks like, he said. Guest right broken. Gold paid. Orders written. Brynden Tully snorted. Truth doesn't always win wars. No, Catelyn Stark said softly. But it wins men. Robb Stark lifted his gaze to the ravens. We send them, he said, to every river lord. To the north. To the Vale. At the word Vale, Ser Loras Tyrell's eyes sharpened. The Vale has sat out this war, he said. Lysa Arryn hides behind mountains. Not all the Vale, Catelyn replied, and her voice held old grief and old fury. Jon Arryn's bannermen have swords. They have honor, and they have been chained by fear and by one woman's weakness. Brynden Tully's mouth twisted. And by Peter Baelish, he added. That snake has been whispering in her ear since before the war. Ser Garland Tyrell's gaze flicked to Olenna's earlier warning. A hook-nosed man who smiles too sweetly, he murmured. We heard the same description. Robb Stark's eyes narrowed. If Littlefinger helped by tonight, he said, then he helped try to murder me. He helped try to murder my mother. He helped try to murder the North. Catelyn Stark's face tightened at the name, old memories surfacing. Peter as a boy in Riverrun. Peter bleeding in the yard. Peter's love turned poisonous. He has always wanted to climb, she whispered, and he has never cared who he steps on. Randyll Tarly pointed to the Vale on the map. If you can pull the Knights of the Vale into this war, he said, you change the balance. Tywin Lannister fears fresh cavalry more than hungry footmen. And if we do not, Ser Loras Tyrell said, Tywin Lannister will crush the Riverlands between his armies while we argue about honor. Robb Stark looked around the table, at faces that had once been strangers and were now bound by blood spilled in the same hall. We make them come, he decided. Not with pleading, with proof.
Ser Garland Tyrell nadid.
We send Lysa Arryn the letters, he said, and we send the Vale Lord's word that the Lannisters paid for the breaking of guest right. There are men in the Vale who will not stomach that. Brynden Tully's eyes glinted. And if Littlefinger is there, he said, we drag him into the light. Catelyn Stark's hand hovered over the map, fingers trembling once. He will slip, she whispered. He always slips. Not if we close the right doors, Ser Loras Tyrell said, and his voice was fierce. Not if we do to him what he tried to do to you. Robb Stark drew a breath and let it out slowly. We hold the twins, he said. We rally the river lords. We send riders after Roose Bolton to harry him, slow him, bleed him, and we send ravens to the Vale with proof and with a promise. Stand with us, and the realm might still be saved from lions. Ser Garland Tyrell glanced toward the south, toward King's Landing he could not see. And Lady Olenna Tyrell, he said quietly. She must know what has happened. Robb Stark nodded once. Send her word, he said. Tell her her rose did not wilt tonight. Ser Loras Tyrell felt something twist in his chest. Pride, fear, love, all tangled. He thought of Marjorie in the Red Keep, smiling at Joffrey Baratheon, and wondered what storms this decision would bring down on her. Then he pushed the thought aside. There would be time for regret later if they lived. In King's Landing, the air still smelled of roses and rot. Olenna Tyrell sat in her chamber with a raven scroll unrolled in her hands, candlelight trembling across ink. The wax seal had been broken so hard it cracked into pieces, as if the hand that broke it could not wait for politeness. Marjorie Tyrell stood behind her grandmother, reading over her shoulder, lips parted. Ser Mace Tyrell paced the room like a bull in a too small stall, muttering curses under his breath. His rings flashed with each furious swing of his hands. Olenna read once, then again, not because she doubted the words, but because she wanted to savor their weight. The doors did not close. The wolf lives. The Frey plot was broken. Lannister gold and letters seized. Roose Bolton fled. The twins are held in Wolf and Rose hands. Olenna's mouth curved slightly, not into a smile, but into something sharper. Cut made clean. Marjorie whispered, "You did it." "I did not," Olenna replied. "Loras did, and if he has any sense, he will not think songs matter more than survival." Mace Tyrell spun on her. "Survival?" he thundered. "Mother, do you understand what you've done? If the king hears, if Tywin hears, this is treason. We are in the Red Keep. We are in a cage with a lion cub," Olenna interrupted, and her voice was mild enough to be terrifying. "And the cub has teeth." As if summoned by her words, laughter drifted from the corridor beyond the door. Joffrey Baratheon's laugh, high, pleased with itself. Olenna glanced toward the doorway and saw him passing with courtiers, crossbow slung as casually as a ribbon. He was talking too loudly, boasting about something stupid, and men laughed because laughing kept them alive. Marjorie's face remained composed, but Olenna saw the tension in her throat, the way her hands clasped tighter than they needed to. Olenna folded the scroll slowly. "Tywin Lannister wanted a neat ending," she murmured. "A wedding, a massacre, a realm too shocked to fight back." Mace Tyrell's face was red with panic. "He will come for us. He will try," Olenna said. "And now he must do it with the realm watching." Marjorie's eyes lifted to her grandmother. "What happens to me?" she asked softly. The question cut through everything. Olenna turned her head and looked up at her granddaughter's face. The face she had brought into this court like a jewel offered to a monster, hoping to tame him long enough to keep House Tyrell safe. Olenna's gaze hardened. "You will not die for their game," she said, voice quiet and absolute. "Not for Tywin. Not for Joffrey." Marjorie's breath caught. "Grandmother," Olenna held up a hand, stopping her. "I have watched kings," she said. "I have watched men with crowns think themselves gods. They all bleed. They all fall. The difference is whether they fall before they pull the world down with them." Mace Tyrell stopped pacing, swallowed. "You mean," he began, and could not finish. Olenna's eyes flicked toward the corridor where Joffrey's laughter faded. "I mean pruning," she said. "A garden does not thrive when one weed strangles everything." Marjorie's face stayed still, but her eyes shone with understanding and fear. "And Loras?" Olenna looked back at the raven scroll in her hand. "Loras has done what knights pretend they do," she said. "He has stopped something monstrous. Now we must make sure his courage does not kill him after the fact." She crossed the room and poured herself a cup of wine, though she did not drink it. Her fingers rested on the cup's rim, steady. "We will act quickly," Olenna said. "We will smile. We will bow. We will let Tywin think he still holds our leash. And then, when the moment comes, we will cut the leash and the hand that holds it." Outside her door, court life continued as if nothing had changed. Servants rushed. Courtiers whispered. The Red Keep's walls held their secrets close. But far to the north, at the twins, wolves and roses had spilled blood together, and the realm had shifted. Olenna Tyrell stared into the candlelight and felt the first honest thrill she'd felt in years. At last, the lions would have to hunt something that could bite back. Tywin Lannister did not spill ink when he read the raven's words. The parchment crackled softly in the candlelight, and for a moment that was the only sound in the Tower of the Hand. No footsteps, no distant laughter from the hall below, no clink of a chain as a guard shifted. The city outside kept breathing as it always did, ignorant of how close it had been to a neat ending. Kevin Lannister stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. His face was a man's face, lined, practical, capable of disappointment. Tywin's was something harder, as if the gods had carved him from stone and then taught the stone to judge. "The wolf lives," Kevin said. reading the truth before Tywin spoke it. Tywin folded the letter once, then again. Each crease was precise. "The wolf lives," he repeated, and in his mouth the words were not surprise, only a correction to a plan. "And the Tyrells?" Kevin asked. His voice lowered instinctively, as if the walls themselves might carry names. "The report says Ser Loras Tyrell rode in with men." Tywin set the folded parchment on the desk beside a pile of ledgers. "Ser Loras Tyrell rode in," he said, "which means Olenna Tyrell sent him." Kevin's jaw tightened. "A foolish play."
No, Tywin replied.
"A hungry one." He turned his head slightly. In the shadows by the door, Grand Maester Pycelle hovered like a worried moth. Varys stood nearby, hands folded, eyes bright with gentle concern that never reached his soul. When Tywin looked at them, they became what he needed them to be. Tools. "Send for the Queen Regent," Tywin said. "And my son." Pycelle bobbed and scurried as quickly as age allowed. Varys did not move until Tywin's eyes flicked to him. "And Lord Tyrell," Tywin added. "All of them. Mace, Olenna, the girl." Varys's smile widened a fraction. "At once, my lord." When the door closed behind him, Kevin exhaled. "If you seize them," he said, "the Reach will rise." Tywin's gaze returned to the city beyond the window, to the river of rooftops and smoke. "If I do not," he said, "the Reach will rise anyway, only with the wolf and the trout at its flank." Kevin hesitated. "What of the Freys?" "The Freys are already dead," Tywin answered. "They simply do not know it yet." Kevin's eyes narrowed. "You would abandon them?" "I would use them," Tywin corrected. "The Freys offered what they always offer, convenience. Their convenience failed. Their existence now is only useful as a warning." He returned to the desk and pulled out another letter, blank parchment waiting like a drawn blade. He dipped his quill, began to write without pause, as if the failure at the twins had only sharpened his hand. "Roose Bolton fled," Kevin said, recalling the Raven's details. "If he reaches the Dreadfort." "He will," Tywin said, not because he trusted Bolton, but because he understood him. "Bolton is not brave. He is patient. Patience is more valuable than courage." Kevin's brow furrowed. "And Walder Frey?" Tywin's quill scratched. "Walder Frey is in chains," he said, "which means the wolf has a hostage and a story. Stories are dangerous. They can make men do foolish things like fight for honor." He finished the line, sanded it, and sealed it with wax stamped with the lion. "This goes to the Riverlands," he said, "to every commander still loyal. They will say the Starks attacked the twins, murdered Freys under a roof of peace, and that the Tyrells aided them." Kevin stared. "But there are witnesses." Tywin's eyes lifted. "Witnesses can be bought," he said, "or frightened or silenced. The realm does not run on truth, Kevin. It runs on what men believe when they are tired and hungry." Kevin looked troubled. "The Tyrell host at the twins." "Half a host," Tywin corrected, sharp, "and far from its fields. It must eat. It must be supplied. We will see how long roses bloom when their roots are starved." A knock came, hard and impatient. Cersei Lannister swept into the room like a blade dressed in silk. Her green eyes flashed with anger before she even saw the letter. She was followed by Tyrion, who moved more slowly, cane tapping once, face guarded beneath a mask of sardonic expectation. "What is it?" Cersei demanded. "You summoned me like a servant." Tywin did not rise. "Read," he said, and tossed her the folded raven. Cersei's eyes scanned, color drained from her face. "This is," she began, and her voice caught. "Impossible." "It is done," Tywin said. "Therefore it is possible." Tyrion held out his hand. Cersei hesitated, then threw the parchment toward him as if it burned. Tyrion read, and his mouth twisted. "Well," Tyrion said softly, "that's inconvenient." Cersei's gaze snapped to Tywin. "The Tyrells," she spat. I told you they were vipers." We should have crushed them before they slithered into our bed. Tywin's eyes never moved from her face. You should choose your words more carefully, he said. They are in our bed whether you like it or not, and we will not thrash and give them reason to bite. Cersei's hands clenched. Joffrey will do as he is told, Tywin said, and the words carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. Tyrion's laugh was small. You intend to tell him, he said, and then you intend to watch the world burn. Tywin ignored him. The Starks have seized the twins, he said. They have proof of Lannister involvement. They will send it to every corner of the realm. Cersei's nostrils flared. Let them, she said. Let them scream about guest right. The small folk will forget by winter. They will not forget a song, Tywin said. And they will sing of a broken wedding longer than they will sing of a battle they never saw. Tyrion leaned on his cane. So what now? He asked. Do you kill Walder Frey for failing? Do you marry Joffrey to a fish to prove your flexibility? Tywin's gaze sharpened. We keep the Tyrells close, he said. We remind them what happens to houses that bite the hand that feed. Them, and we salvage what we can. Cersei stepped closer, voice lowered, urgent. Father, if the Reach turns, we cannot hold the Riverlands and the Crownlands both. We cannot fight everyone. Tywin met her eyes. Then we will ensure the Reach does not turn completely, he said. We will give them something they want, just enough to keep them at table, while we take from them the things they cannot replace. Tyrion's smile was thin. Hostages, he guessed. Tywin's silence was answer enough. Outside, the bells of King's Landing began to toll the hour, and Tywin Lannister, stone-faced, unhurried, began writing a war in ink that would be paid for in blood. Olenna Tyrell heard the raven before she saw it. The flutter of wings against stone carried through the red keep's corridors like a secret trying to escape. Servants moved too quickly, eyes down, mouths tight. Even in a castle built on whispers, panic had a scent. Margaery entered Olenna's chamber without waiting to be announced, the hem of her gown brushing the rushes. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it as if it might keep the world out. Tywin Lannister summoned us, she said softly. All of us. Olenna sat by the window with her hands folded in her lap, a picture of calm so perfect it was nearly insulting. Of course he did, she replied. A lion that has missed its prey must still show its teeth. Margaery's eyes flicked to the corridor beyond, where distant laughter drifted, Joffrey's laugh, bright and ugly. He is boasting, she murmured. He thinks the wolf will be dead by nightfall. He doesn't know. Olenna's mouth tightened. He will know soon enough, she said. And when he does, he will tantrum like a child denied a toy. Margaery crossed the room and knelt beside her grandmother, fingers seeking Olenna's hand. For all her poise, the girl was still a girl in some quiet corners. If Tywin decides we betrayed him, she whispered, he could. He could do many things, Olenna said. He could kill us. He could keep us. He could try to trade you like a brooch. The question is not what he can do. The question is what he dares. Margaery's eyes lifted, searching. What do we do? Olenna's gaze drifted to the table where embroidery lay half-finished. The needle glittered. We do what we always do, she said. We smile. We bow. We pretend our hearts beat for lions. Margaery's lips pressed together. And Loras? He will not be in Tywin's reach, Olenna replied, though the words tasted bitter. She thought of Loras bruised and bloodied, far from this warm cage. She thought of his rash courage, and how easy it would be for Tywin to punish the Reach by hurting those still in King's Landing. She rose slowly, joints protesting. Fetch your father, she told Margaery, and bring him his courage if you can find it. Margaery's mouth flickered with humor that died quickly. She moved to obey. Olenna rang a small bell. A serving woman entered, eyes lowered. Olenna studied her. Young, plain, forgettable, perfect. What is your name? Olenna asked. The girl swallowed. Poppy, my lady. Poppy, Olenna said, as if tasting it. You have family? The girl's eyes widened. A brother, she whispered. At the city watch stables. Olenna smiled gently. Then you will do a small thing for me, and your brother will keep his teeth. Poppy trembled. Olenna handed her a tiny roll of parchment no larger than a finger. The wax seal was not the rose. It was blank. This goes to the kitchens, Olenna said. To the man who sharpens knives. He will know what to do. The girl nodded, hands shaking. And Poppy, Olenna added, if anyone stops you, you are carrying a recipe. Poppy fled. Olenna turned back toward the window, looking down at the city. Somewhere beyond those walls, ravens would already be flying from the twins. Some would reach the Vale. Some would reach the Riverlands. Some would be caught and killed. She needed more than ravens. She needed eyes. She needed doors that opened at the right moment. A knock came. Mace Tyrell lumbered in, face red, breath short with indignation. This is madness, he began at once. Tywin has summoned. He looked at me as if I were a traitor. As if you might finally be something other than ornamental, Olenna said sweetly. Mace's face flushed darker. Mother! Olenna stepped close, and the sweetness dropped away. Listen to me, she said, voice low. Tywin Lannister will try to keep us by keeping you. He will dangle your pride and your titles like meat. You will not snap at it. Mace blinked. What do you? I mean, Olenna said, that if he threatens you, you will stand very still and look stupid. It is your greatest skill. Use it. Mace's mouth opened, then closed. Marjorie returned, smoothing her gown as if smoothing fear from her skin. Grandmother, she said softly, Joffrey is coming. As if to mock them, the door banged open without a servant's announcement. Joffrey Baratheon strode in, crossbow slung over his shoulder, cheeks flushed with childish excitement. Lady Olenna, he said, voice loud. Mother, my bride. He looked at Marjorie with possessive delight, then at Olenna with the faint annoyance of a boy faced with a teacher. You'll be pleased, Joffrey declared. I hear the wolf has gone to his doom. The Freys will put his head on a spike. I should like to see it. Marjorie's smile did not falter. That sounds terrible, she said softly, as if the thought pained her. War makes monsters of everyone. Joffrey laughed. War makes monsters of the weak, he corrected, and kings of men like me. Olenna studied him in silence, seeing again the garden boy flinching, the crossbow bolt snapping stone, the pleasure in fear. A weed. A strangling vine. Joffrey turned, catching sight of the open window. I will have a celebration, he announced. A feast. A great feast. And when Robb Stark's head arrives, I'll present it to you, Marjorie, as a wedding gift. Marjorie's eyes softened as if touched. You are too generous, she murmured, and Olenna wanted to weep at the skill of it, at the way her granddaughter could turn horror into flattery without blinking. Joffrey preened and strode out again, leaving them with the echo of his laughter. Olenna waited until the corridor swallowed him, then spoke, voice quiet. That, she said, is why Loras rode. Marjorie's hand tightened on Olenna's. And if Tywin keeps us here, she whispered, how do we help him? Olenna's eyes narrowed. We help him by surviving, she said, and by making sure the wrong king does not live long enough to avenge himself. Outside, somewhere in the Tower of the Hand, Tywin Lannister waited with lion's patience. Olenna Tyrell turned from the window and began arranging her smile like armor. Morning at the twins arrived gray and damp, as if the river itself exhaled grief. The yard was a ruin of broken torches, trampled rushes, and bodies carried out under sheets. Blood had soaked into stone so deeply it seemed the castle would wear the stain forever. Ravens gathered on the battlements, black dots against a pale sky, watching with the same appetite that had watched the war for years. Robb Stark walked the bridge between the towers and felt the weight of every step. The twins had been meant to be a throat that choked his cause. Instead, it was now a place where his cause could breathe, if he could hold it. Grey Wind limped beside him, a shallow wound on his flank bandaged crudely with cloth. The wolf's eyes were bright and angry. Every so often he bared his teeth at a Frey guard under Stark watch, and the man would look away quickly, as if a wolf's gaze carried judgment. Below, the river churned dark. It did not care about kings or treachery. It only moved. In the eastern tower, a hall had been cleared. The long tables were scrubbed, the rushes replaced, but no amount of water could erase the memory. The air still tasted faintly of wine and iron. River lords arrived before noon, drawn by ravens and rumor. Lord Jason Mallister came with his sea eagle banners and a face like stone. The Brackens and Blackwoods arrived separately, glaring at each other even in shared outrage. Men who had fought for Robb and men who had doubted him stood in the same room and looked at the same proof. Ser Garland Tyrell laid the letters out again. Seals cracked. Lannister gold clinked when he tipped purses onto the table. A strip of cloth with hidden pockets was passed from hand to hand like a relic. "They broke guest right," Lord Mallister said, voice thick. "There is no defense." "There is coin," Lord Blackwood replied bitterly. "Coin buys many things." Robb Stark stood at the table's head and listened to their anger like a storm he had to steer. His crown stayed off his head. He did not want iron between him and the truth. "They meant to end us in one night," he said. His voice was steady, but the room could hear the rawness beneath. "My mother, my uncle, my lords, every man who trusted that roof. They would have killed us and called it justice." A murmur of assent rolled through the hall. Men shifted, hands clenching on belt knots, faces tightening with remembered fear. "And they failed," Ser Loras Tyrell said, stepping forward. He looked battered now in daylight, the bruise under his shoulder plate darkening, his knuckles wrapped. But his eyes were alive with a fierce clarity. "They failed because you were not alone." Some river lords stared at him with suspicion, old resentment flaring. House Tyrell had ridden with Renly. House Tyrell now sat beside lions. Trust did not come easily. Lord Bracken's mouth curled. "Convenient," he said. "The Reach arrives at the very moment a Stark king is nearly slaughtered." Ser Loras Tyrell's gaze did not flinch. "Convenient for whom?" he asked. "My men died on your rushes. If we meant to buy favor, there are cheaper ways than bleeding for it." Lord Blackfish, Brynden Tully, leaned on the table edge and snorted. "He's right," he said. "If Tyrell wanted you dead, boy, you'd be dead. They have plenty of arrows."
Robb Stark met Loras Kees.
"What does your house want?" he asked quietly. The room stilled. That was the true question. Not outrage, not honor. Want.
Ser Loras Tyrell jou tiktanat.
"My grandmother wants the realm to live long enough for the Reach to keep feeding it," he said. "And she wants Tywin Lannister to remember, he is not the only man who can make a knife disappear in the dark." Brynden Tully's eyes narrowed. "And you?" he asked. "What do you want? Knight of Flowers?" For a heartbeat, Loras looked like a young man again, like someone who remembered tourneys and songs and the warm safety of being admired. Then his face hardened. "I want the men who planned this to pay," he said. "That is all." Robb Stark nodded once. "Then we want the same thing." He turned back to the map on the table. "Roose Bolton fled," he said. "He will run for the north and try to claim what he can. I will not allow it." Lord Mallister's voice was grim. "If Bolton reaches the neck, he can hide behind bog and water. He will be hard to pull out." "We will not let him reach it unbled," Brynden Tully said. His eyes glinted with the cold joy of a man who understood pursuit. "Give me riders," he added.
Fast men.
"Hungry men. I'll make him pay for every mile."
Ser Garland Tyrell nadid.
"My brother will spare cavalry," he offered. "Reach horses have long legs." Robb Stark looked around the room. "We hold the twins," he said. "We send ravens to every lord in the Riverlands. The Freys are traitors and their lord is in chains. Any Frey holdfast that resists will be treated as enemy. Any lord who comes to us will find protection." A rumble of approval rose. And we send proof to the Vale, Robb continued, voice sharpening. To Lysa Arryn, to every Vale lord with honor left. The Vale has sat out this war behind mountains. Tonight's treachery should wake them. Catelyn Stark stood at the room's edge, silent, her face a mask of iron. At the mention of her sister, something flickered in her eyes. Hope, anger, fear. She said nothing. She did not trust Hope. Robb looked at her anyway. "Mother," he said gently, "your family must answer." Catelyn Stark's lips pressed together. "If Lysa has any sense of blood," she whispered, "she will." Ser Loras Tyrell felt the hall's eyes on him again, weighing Rose against Wolf. He did not care. He had ridden to stop slaughter, not to earn affection. Outside, a Frey raven took wing under Stark guard, carrying orders Walder Frey had been forced to sign. Other ravens rose as well, carrying letters stamped with wolves and roses. Above the bridge, the raven's black wings beat against the gray sky. The realm was about to hear a son. It could not ignore. The Eyrie woke slowly, as if even dawn needed permission to climb that high. Mist clung to the mountains like damp wool. The sky was a hard, pale bowl above the Vale, and the air was so thin it made every breath feel like a choice. In the high chambers, the fire burned low, reluctant in the cold. Lysa Arryn sat beneath a canopy of pale blue, her son cradled against her chest like a precious thing that might crumble. Robin's fingers toyed with her hair as if it belonged to him. His eyes were sleepy and sour. "I dreamed," he mumbled. "I dreamed the moon door ate you." Lysa shuddered. "It can't," she whispered. "I won't let it. I won't let anyone take you from me." A knock came, hesitant. Maester Coleman's voice trembled through the door. "My lady," he called. "A raven from the Riverlands." Lysa's body went still. Ravens brought war. War brought men. Men brought death. She had built the Vale into a locked chest to keep those things out, and now a black-winged key had found its way in. "Bring it," she said, then immediately regretted the words. The parchment came wrapped in wax stamped with a wolf. Her fingers shook as she broke it. She read once, then again, eyes widening. The words blurred and sharpened, as if the ink itself pulsed with danger. Guest right broken. Frey treachery exposed. Lannister gold. Lannister seals. Tyrell steel in the hall. The Wolf King alive. The Leech Lord fled. And then, like a knife slid gently between ribs, Petyr Baelish. Lysa's breath hitched. She looked up as if the name might be hovering in the air, listening. Petyr was there, of course. He always seemed to be there when she needed him, like a warm hand on a frightened shoulder. He sat by the hearth in a fine doublet, one leg crossed over the other, smiling with soft concern. "What is it, my lady?" he asked, voice kind. "Bad news from your sister?" Lysa clutched Robin tighter. She whispered. "They say." Petyr rose and crossed the room with the easy confidence of a man who had never been truly afraid. He took the parchment gently from her fingers, careful not to touch her skin as if her fear might stain him. He read quickly, eyes moving like a dancer's feet. His smile did not change. That was what frightened Lysa most. "A tragic business," Petyr murmured at last. "The Riverlands are full of tragedies." "They say the Freys tried to kill Robb," Lysa said, voice rising. "At a wedding. They say Tywin Lannister paid." Petyr's eyes softened. "People say many things in war," he replied. "Desperate men make desperate accusations. And they say you," Lysa blurted suddenly, "they say your fingers are in it." For a heartbeat, something flashed behind Petyr's eyes, too quick to name. Then it vanished beneath warmth. He smiled at her as if she were a child frightened by thunder. "My sweet Lysa," he said, and he reached to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Do you truly think I would do something so crude? If the Lannisters wished to end the war, they would do it with armies, not minstrels." "The letter has Lannister seals," Lysa insisted, voice cracking. "Real wax, real lions." Petyr held the parchment near the firelight, studying it as if studying art. Seals can be stolen, he said calmly. Letters forged. And even if Tywin did pay for some ugly deed, what of it? We are safe here. That is what matters. The Vale is untouched. You have kept your people safe. You have kept your son safe. Robin whined and pinched Lisa's skin. She barely felt it. Maester Coleman cleared his throat. My lady, he said carefully. There is a second raven. From the twins. Lisa's eyes widened further. Another. The second parchment bore no wolf seal. It bore a rose gold on green. Lisa's fingers went cold as she broke it. The words were blunt, soldierly. Proof enclosed. Lannister gold. Bolton treachery. Frey betrayal. A request, no, a demand for the Vale to answer. And beneath it, the names of Vale lords, as if House Tyrell already knew who in the Vale still mattered. Jon Royce.
Onyo Veenwood.
Horton Redfort. Lisa's throat tightened. They're calling on them, she whispered. Peter's smile held. Of course, he said gently. They want to drag the Vale into their war because your sister cannot win alone. They will whisper of honor and blood and duty until men leap from cliffs for it. Lisa clutched Robin, eyes darting. But if they're right, if Tywin truly... Peter knelt beside her chair, voice lowering into intimacy. If Tywin Lannister truly did such a thing, he said, then the realm will eat itself, and you, my lady, will be wise to stay behind stone and snow. He took her hand then, pressing it to his cheek as if he were worshipping. Lisa's breath caught, warmth and fear tangling. Peter always knew where to touch. Let me handle this, Peter whispered. I will speak to the lords. I will soothe them. I will keep your Vale safe. Lisa nodded automatically, because nodding was easier than thinking, and Peter's voice wrapped around her like a blanket. But outside the Eyrie, ravens were already flying down to the Vale's lower castles, carrying names and proof. And in Runestone, Bronze Jon Royce would soon read a lion-sealed letter and feel something cold and ancient wake behind his ribs. The mountains had kept the war out for a long time. Now the war was knocking at the door with ink and honor and the promise of vengeance. Peter Baelish watched Lisa Arryn crumble back into her pillows and felt only mild irritation. Fear was useful, fear made people cling. But too much fear made them useless, and Lisa, in her soft, shivering way, had always teetered on that edge. He needed her to be a door he could open, not a wall that collapsed on him. He left her chamber with quiet steps, closing the door like a man leaving a sickbed. Outside, the corridor was cold stone and silence. Guards stood stiff as statues. They watched Peter with the wary respect of men who knew he was favored and did not understand why. Good, Peter thought. Confusion was a better leash than loyalty. He descended from the high chambers to the steward's hall, where the Eyrie's servants moved like ghosts. Maester Coleman hovered near a table of ledgers, face pinched. Maester, Peter said pleasantly. The ravens have been active. Coleman swallowed. Yes, my lord. Peter's smile deepened. They will be more active, he said. I would hate for Lady Lisa Arryn to be troubled by every scrap of northern ink. Wouldn't you? Coleman's eyes darted. I only do my duty. And your duty? Peter murmured, leaning in close enough that Coleman could smell the mint on his breath. Is to keep your lady calm. Calm ladies do not open moon doors in fits of grief. Coleman's mouth tightened. What do you ask of me? Peter straightened, hands clasped behind his back. Only that certain messages arrive late, he said lightly. Or not at all. Ink can be lost. Ravens can tire. Coleman's cheeks went pale. That is treacherous, Peter finished, chuckling softly. No. Treachery is what happened at the twins. This is housekeeping. He patted the maester's shoulder as if offering comfort. Keep the ones stamped with wolves, he said. Keep the ones stamped with roses. Bring me anything stamped with a lion. Coleman stared at him, and Peter could see the maester's mind shuffling between fear of sin and fear of a fall. Peter had learned long ago that most men preferred falling into mud rather than falling through air. Peter walked on, down to the lower court where the Ares knights trained in stiff, thin air.
Steel rang.
Breath steamed. Men laughed as they struck at each other with blunted swords. They did not laugh often when letters came. Ser Lyn Corbray stood apart, practicing alone with a real blade. He moved like a man trying to outrun his own temper. When he saw Peter, he stopped, wiping sweat from his brow. "My lord," Lyn said, voice clipped. His eyes were sharp, hungry. Peter approached with easy familiarity. "Ser Lyn," he said, "I hear the Riverlands have sent us a song." Lyn's mouth curled. "They want the Vale to fight," he said bluntly. "They always do." Peter sighed as if burdened. "Honor is so exhausting," he agreed. "It makes men forget who feeds them." Lyn's gaze narrowed. "What do you want?" Peter's smile softened. "Only peace," he said, "and I am willing to pay for it." At the word pay, Lyn's eyes flicked. Quick. Peter saw the calculation and felt a private satisfaction. Men were easy when you understood which hunger drove them. He reached into his sleeve and produced a small pouch. Inside it, coins clinked softly. "For your troubles," Peter murmured, "and for your continued discretion." Lyn's jaw tightened, but his hand took the pouch. "If the other lords rise," he said, "coin won't stop them." Peter nodded. "No," he said, "but steel might." Lyn's smile was thin. "Who's steel?" Peter glanced up at the sky, at the falcons circling above the mountains. "The Vales," he said, pointed outward. "If we can convince them there is a threat greater than their pride." Lyn snorted. "The North?" he asked. Peter's eyes gleamed. "The Lannisters," he said softly, and watched Lyn's face shift in surprise. Or rather, the idea of Lannisters dishonoring guest right. Men hate dishonor when it is not theirs. He turned away before Lyn could speak again, leaving the knight with coin and questions. In a small chamber lined with shelves, Peter spread the wolf and rose letters on a table. He read them again, not for content, but for texture. He imagined the hands that wrote them. He imagined Catelyn Stark's anger. He imagined Olenna Tyrell's cold patience. They wanted him dragged into the light. He had lived his whole life learning how to stand in sunlight without being burned. He dipped his quill and began writing to King's Landing. To Tywin Lannister, he wrote with careful humility. The Vale remained quiet, Lady Lysa Arryn remained fearful, but the lords were restless. They had received accusations. They had received proof. It would take coin, favors, and perhaps blood to keep the mountains closed. To Catelyn Stark, he wrote nothing. Silence was sometimes the cruelest reply. When he sealed the letter to Tywin with plain wax, he smiled. The lions would need him now more than ever. The wolves and roses might chase him, but lions paid best. He folded the remaining proofs and slid them into a hidden compartment beneath the table, because evidence was a dagger and Peter Baelish preferred to hold the dagger, not wear it in his ribs. Outside, the wind screamed along the mountain paths like a warning. Peter Baelish listened to it and thought, with mild amusement, that the world was finally becoming interesting again. Runestone did not smile. Its walls were old, its stones heavy with salt and wind, and the men who ruled it had never learned the courtly trick of hiding steel beneath silk. Bronze Yohn Royce read the raven's words with a face carved from the same rock as his keep. Guest right broken, Lannister gold, Frey betrayal, Bolton treachery.
Tyrell intervention.
And then the final line, as sharp as a spear point. The Vale is called to answer. Yohn Royce's fingers tightened on the parchment until it crumpled. In the hall behind him, his bannermen waited, watching his shoulders for any sign of movement. They did not chatter. They were Vale men. They spoke with actions. "The Vale has been shamed," Yohn said at last, voice low. "Not by our own hand, but by our absence." One of his knights shifted. "Lady Lysa Arryn will not call banners," he said. It was not accusation, only truth. "She will hide behind the Eyrie until the realm burns." Yohn's eyes hardened. "Then we will climb to the Eyrie and remind her what her husband died for," he replied. Within days, riders carried his summons across the Vale. to Iron Oaks, to Red Fort, to Heart's Home, to the gates of the moon. Lords and ladies read the proof and felt old oaths stir in blood. They gathered not at the Eyrie first, but at the gates of the moon, where the road narrowed and the mountains rose like judgment. Banners snapped in cold wind. Falcons and crescent moons, bronze runes, red stones, green Waynwoods. Lady Anya Waynwood arrived wrapped in furs, eyes sharp as needles. Horton Redfort came with a grim set to his mouth. Even Lord Belmore, who preferred comfort, rode with an uneasy look, as if fearing he might be forced to do something honorable. They stood together in the cold court, looking up toward the Eyrie's white perch high above. The castle seemed to float like a dream, beautiful, distant, and utterly unconcerned with men bleeding below. A messenger from the Eyrie came down at last, cheeks red from thin air, cloak flapping. He bowed stiffly. "My lords," he began. "Lady Lisa Arryn commands." Jon Royce cut him off. "Lady Lisa Arryn can command when she remembers she is an Arryn," he said. The messenger swallowed. "She commands you disperse," he finished weakly. "The Vale is at peace." Lady Waynwood's laugh was cold. "Peace?" she said. "Tell your lady sister that peace is not a wall. It is an oath." They sent their own party up the mountain path. Lords, guards, and a handful of men hardened to thin air. The climb was slow and brutal, each step an insult to soft southern lungs. But outrage carried men higher than muscle. At the gates of the moon, Peter Baelish met them with a smile that would have been charming in any other place. He wore fine cloth and warmth in his eyes, as if he were welcoming guests to a feast rather than men who might drag him into a cell. "My lords," Peter said, spreading his hands. "What a surprise. I feared you might all be too busy enjoying the Vale's peace to travel." Jon Royce's stare did not soften. "We travel because honor has been murdered at a wedding," he said. "And you would have us pretend we did not hear the scream." Peter's smile held. "The Riverlands are full of screams," he replied gently. "If we answered them all, we would never sleep." Horton Redfort stepped forward, thrusting the lion-sealed proof toward Peter's face. "Explain this," he demanded. Peter glanced at the seal as if it were a smudge. "Wax," he said. "Anyone can press wax." "And gold?" Lady Waynwood asked sharply. "Can anyone press gold into a minstrel's hand?" Peter sighed as if pained by their lack of imagination. "My friends," he said, "you have been handed a tale by men who want your swords. Wolves and roses want the Vale to bleed for them. If you go to war, who keeps your small folk safe? Who keeps your sons from dying in mud?" "Jon Arryn did," Jon Royce said, voice like iron. "He kept the realm from falling apart while you counted coin in King's Landing." Peter's eyes flickered. "And where did Jon Arryn's honor get him?" he asked softly. "Dead." A hush fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. Peter smiled again, smaller now. "Lady Lisa Arryn does not wish to reopen the wounds of war," he said. "She is frightened. She is a mother. Would you punish her for that?" "We punish you," Lady Waynwood replied, stepping closer. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Because these letters mention your name. Because the stink of your smile is on too many tragedies. Because the Vale has had enough of being steered by a man with no banners." Peter's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes cooled. "I am only your lady's loyal servant," he said. Jon Royce's hand fell to his sword hilt. "Then serve her by stepping aside," he said. "We go to the Eyrie. We will speak to Lady Lisa Arryn ourselves." Peter's smile widened, as if amused by a child's stubbornness. "Of course," he said. "Climb, speak, demand. But remember, your lady holds the keys. And the moon door." As the Vale lords began the climb, Peter Baelish watched them go with a quiet, calculating gaze. He had always preferred games played on cliffs. The question was whether he was still the one holding the rope. Roose Bolton rode north as if the wind were something he could outlast. He kept his men tight and silent, moving along lesser tracks, avoiding villages where eyes might recognize him. He did not look back at the twins. In his mind, the wedding was already a story told incorrectly by survivors. Stories could be corrected later. The only thing that mattered now was distance. A drizzle fell, turning the world to gray smear. Bolton's cloak darkened, his horse's ears pinned back in irritation. Behind him, a dozen riders followed, Bolton men, hard-faced, carrying the stink of the Dreadfort with them like a shadow. They passed a burned hamlet where the only sound was a dog whining over ashes. One of Bolton's men spat and urged his horse on. Roose watched the dog for a heartbeat, then looked away. Suffering was common. It did not deserve attention. A horn call echoed faintly through the trees. Not close, not yet, but a sound that carried warning. Roose Bolton's pale eyes narrowed. Pursuit. He did not curse. He did not panic. He only adjusted his pace, moving his column toward a line of woods thick enough to hide in if needed. Behind them, Brynden Tully rode like a man half his age. The Blackfish had taken the fastest riders, Northmen who knew how to live on cold anger, and reach cavalry with horses bred for distance. Ser Loras Tyrell rode with them, bruised but unyielding, his green cloak muddied, his jaw set as if it were carved from the same iron as Robb's crown. Bolton's clever, Brynden said, voice rough. He's not taking the main road. He's trying to slip through the cracks. Then we make the cracks bleed, Loras replied. They found the first of Bolton's discarded traces at dusk. A dead horse in a ditch, its throat cut. The kind of mercy that was also a message. The horse had been lamed, slowed. Bolton did not keep anything that slowed him. Brynden grunted. Cold bastard. Loras dismounted, touched the horse's neck. The blood was still tacky. He's close, he said. They pushed harder. On the second night, they caught Bolton's rear. It happened near a narrow bridge over a swollen stream. Bolton's men had set a small ambush. 2 riders hidden in brush, arrows knocked, hoping to cripple a horse or 2 and buy time. Brynden saw them anyway. He had been hunting men longer than some of these riders had been alive. He raised his hand, signaled. A Tyrell outrider circled wide. A Northman slid off his saddle and crept through reeds. Then the ambush sprang itself. An arrow flew, striking nothing but air. Brynden's riders hit them like wolves. Steel flashed. A man screamed as a sword took his hand. Another tried to run and was pulled from his horse by a reachman's spear. The fight was over in heartbeats, quick and ugly. They dragged one of the ambushers upright, young, face smeared with mud, eyes wide with terror. He wore a flayed man patch on his cloak. "Where is Bolton?" Loras demanded. The boy's lips trembled. "And north," he stammered. He's going for the neck. Brynden slapped him lightly, not cruel, but sharp enough to jar truth loose. "How many men?" he asked. "Not many," the boy gasped. Just enough." He said the wolf lived, so the leech must hide. Loras's mouth twisted. "He thinks like a leech," he muttered. Brynden leaned closer. "And Ramsay Snow?" he asked suddenly. "Where is the bastard?" The boy's eyes flicked away. Fear deepened. "At the Dreadfort," he whispered. Or on the road. Lord Bolton, he sent word. He said Winterfell is ashes and it's time to claim what's left. Brynden's face hardened. He said, "That's his real prize." Loras felt a chill that had nothing to do with night air. Winterfell ashes. Stark home turned to ruin. Bolton reaching for it like a man reaching for a crown. He looked north into darkness. "We have to catch him," he said, voice tight, "before he reaches the neck." Brynden shook his head slowly. "We might not," he admitted. "He has a head start and he knows these lands well enough to buy guides." Loras's hands curled into fists. "Then what do we do?" he demanded. Brynden's eyes were sharp. "We make sure he cannot travel clean," he said. "We take his men. We take his messages. We take his supplies. We make him arrive in the north looking like what he is, a traitor running from a failed murder." Loras stared at the captured boy, then at the dead men in the mud. He understood then that war was not only about killing. It was about shaping what remained. They pushed on, harrying Bolton's trail like wolves that could not catch the throat but could tear the flanks. And far ahead, Roose Bolton listened to a distant horn and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the faintest taste of annoyance. He had intended to leave the wedding as a clean cut. Instead, it had become a wound that refused to close. The throne room of the Red Keep was too bright for honest conversation. Sunlight spilled through high windows and painted the Iron Throne's blades with gold, turning old steel into something almost holy. Courtiers lined the walls like decoration. Knights stood stiff with polished armor and empty eyes. Tywin Lannister sat beneath the throne not as king, but as something more practical, the hand that moved the kingdom. When the Tyrells entered, Mace blustering, Olenna steady, Marjorie serene, the room's air tightened as if everyone had inhaled at once. Cersei stood near the dais, lips pressed thin. Joffrey lounged on the throne itself, crown crooked, fingers tapping the armrest with impatient arrogance. "Lord Tyrell," Tywin said, voice even. "Lady Olenna, my lady." Marjorie curtsied, her smile warm. "Lord Hand," she said. Tywin's gaze did not soften. "We have received disturbing news," he said. "From the Riverlands." Mace Tyrell's laugh came out too loud. "War is full of disturbing news," he said. "A pity, but hardly surprising." Tywin lifted a hand. A guard stepped forward and held out a parchment. The seal was broken, wolf and rose. Tywin did not offer it to the Tyrells. He let it hang between them like bait. "Ser Loras Tyrell brought armed men to the twins," Tywin said. "Those men fought in the courtyard and in the hall. Frey blood was spilled. Lannister banners were insulted." Mace's face reddened. "My son is a knight," he blurted. "He would never." "He did," Tywin replied, and the certainty in his voice made Mace's protest die. Olenna stepped forward, hands folded. "My grandson rides where he is needed," she said calmly. "If he rode to the twins, he must have believed something was wrong." Joffrey laughed. Sharp. "Something was wrong," he said gleefully. "The wrong people lived." Marjorie's hand lifted gently, resting on Joffrey's arm as if soothing. "Your Grace," she murmured. "Please." Joffrey looked at her with possessive delight, then turned back to Olenna with a sneer. "The Freys were doing the realm a service," he declared, "killing traitors, and your precious knight interfered." Tywin's eyes flicked to Joffrey, warning. Joffrey ignored it as he always did. Olenna's smile remained. "Kings like service," she said lightly, "but they like success more." A murmur moved through courtiers, quickly smothered. Tywin's voice cut clean. "We will speak of success," he said. "The Starks now claim the twins. They claim Lord Walder Frey is in chains. They claim proof of Lannister involvement." Cersei's eyes flashed. "Lies," she hissed. Olenna's gaze slid to Cersei as if examining a bruise. "Perhaps," she said, "but if the realm believes them, lies can still kill." Tywin studied Olenna for a long moment. "Do you deny your house aided the Starks?" he asked. Olenna's eyes did not blink. "I deny nothing I have not heard myself," she said. "And I have not heard from Ser Loras Tyrell yet." Mace Tyrell seized that like a drowning man seizing driftwood. "Yes," he blurted. "We don't even know." Tywin's mouth tightened. "You will hear," he said. "And until you do, you will remain in King's Landing." Mace froze. Marjorie's smile did not falter, but Olenna felt her granddaughter's fingers tense on her sleeve. Hostages, Olenna thought. Of course. Joffrey leaned forward, grinning. "I should send for my crossbow," he said. "Perhaps I'll shoot a rose and see if it bleeds green." Marjorie's laugh was soft, affectionate. "You have such wicked thoughts," she murmured, leaning close enough that her perfume softened him. "Save them for our wedding night." Joffrey's grin widened, and he settled back, pleased. Olenna watched the exchange and felt ice form behind her ribs. This boy would never be controlled. He would only be endured until someone ended him. Tywin dismissed the courtiers with a gesture, clearing the room until only the essential predators remained. Then he leaned forward, voice lowered. "Lady Olenna," he said, "you have lived long enough to recognize folly. Do not let your house be dragged into stark desperation." Olenna's smile was polite. "And you have lived long enough to recognize overreach," she replied. "Do not let your house choke on its own certainty." Tywin's eyes narrowed. "If the reach turns," he said softly, "I will burn it." Olenna's gaze was steady. "If you try," she said, "you will find thorns." For a heartbeat, the two of them stared at each other, lion and thorn, both understanding that the war had shifted, and neither willing to admit fear. Marjorie stepped forward, voice gentle. "Lord Hand," she said, "whatever happened at the twins, we all want peace. Let us not tear the realm apart further." Tywin looked at her then, and Olenna saw calculation in his eyes. The girl was valuable. The girl was leverage. The girl was a chain. "Peace," Tywin repeated. "Yes, peace." Joffrey yawned, bored. "Peace after I see heads," he said. Olenna listened to the words and made her decision again. Firmer. Pruning. Sooner rather than later. Because if the realm was to survive thorns and wolves and lions, one weed on the throne would have to be cut down before it strangled everything. The airy sky was a hard blue the day the Vale Lords reached its gates. Snow glittered on the high paths. The wind cut like a knife, turning cheeks raw. Men climbed with grim determination, breath steaming, hands gripping rock as if gripping the edge of the world. Banners could not fly well that high. The air stole them. So the lords brought their honor instead, heavy and unyielding. Lysa Arryn met them in the high hall with her son perched on her lap like a spoiled cat. Her fingers clutched his shoulder too tightly. Her eyes darted as if expecting daggers in every shadow. Bronze Yohn Royce bowed, stiff. Lady Anya Waynwood inclined her head. Horton Redfort did not smile. Behind them stood their knights, boots echoing on marble, cloaks flapping in thin air. Peter Baelish stood at Lysa's side, hands folded, face soft with concern. He looked like a man trying to keep peace between frightened family members. Yohn Royce did not buy it. "My lady," Yohn said, voice steady, "we have received proof of a crime that stains the realm. Guest right was broken at the twins. Lannister gold bought the breaking. The Freys and Boltons conspired to murder a king at a wedding." Lysa's lips trembled. "I have heard," she whispered, "and I will not be dragged into war by northern lies." Lady Waynwood stepped forward, holding out the lion-sealed parchment. "These are not northern lies," she said. "These are southern seals." Lysa's eyes widened, fear sharpening. She looked to Peter instinctively, like a child looking for a hand in darkness. Peter smiled gently. "My lady is frightened," he told the assembled lords. "And rightly, war has eaten enough sons. Let the mountains remain closed." Horton Redfort's jaw tightened. "Closed?" he repeated. "While the realm burns, while honor is butchered at feasts." Peter's eyes softened. "Honor did not keep Jon Arryn alive," he said quietly. The name hung in the air like smoke. Lysa flinched, clutching Robin harder. "Don't," she whispered. Yohn Royce's gaze fixed on Peter then, hard as bronze. "Jon Arryn kept this realm from falling apart," he said. "And you," he added, voice low, "were in King's Landing counting coin when he died." Peter's smile did not crack, but something behind it cooled. "I mourned Jon Arryn," he said softly. "I mourned him deeply." Lady Waynwood's eyes narrowed. "Then you will not object to stepping aside while we speak to Our Lady," she said. Peter spread his hands. "I am only here to help," he replied. "Help yourself down the mountain," Horton Redfort said, blunt. A ripple moved through the knights. Hands hovered near sword hilts. The Ares marble seemed suddenly fragile. Lysa's voice rose, shrill. "You cannot speak to him that way," she snapped. "He is my friend. He keeps me safe." Yohn Royce's gaze softened only for a heartbeat, pity flickering. Then it hardened again. "My lady," he said, "your safety is not worth the Vale's shame." Robin whined, squirming. "I'm tired," he complained. "Make them go." Lisa kissed his hair frantically. "They will go," she promised, then looked up at the lords with desperation. "Go," she said again, louder. "I command it." Silence answered her. Peter stepped forward, voice soothing. "My lords," he said, "please, do not force her." You forced her enough," Lady Waynwood said, and the words struck like a slap. Peter's eyes flickered. "What do you mean?" Lady Waynwood held up another parchment, this one sealed with a rose. "Ser Loras Tyrell's men captured a Frey messenger," she said. Under questioning, the messenger described a man who smiled too sweetly and paid in gold. "He described you." Peter's smile remained, but it became thinner, more careful. "Descriptions are unreliable," he said gently. "Half the realm has been called sweet." Yohn Royce took a step closer. "And yet your name appears in the Stark's letters," he said, "and in the Tyrells. And now you stand here urging us to do nothing while the lions dishonor the realm." Peter's gaze shifted toward the moon door at the far end of the hall, as if measuring distance. Lisa saw it and followed, breath hitching. "You wouldn't?" she whispered, frightened now not of the lords, but of the sudden shape of Peter's interest. Peter turned back to her, smile returning like a mask. "My sweet Lisa," he murmured, "I would never harm you." Yohn Royce's voice cut in. "Then let us see your loyalty," he said. "Swear before all of us that you took no Lannister coin for this. Swear you had no hand in the Freys' treachery." Peter's eyes glittered. "Swears are wind," he said softly. "They blow away when men want them to." Horton Redfort stepped forward, anger snapping. "That is not an answer." Peter's smile widened just enough to show teeth. "No," he said, "it is not." He moved suddenly, faster than his gentle demeanor suggested, hand sliding inside his sleeve. Steel flashed. Ser Lyn Corbray, standing behind the lords with his hand on his sword, moved at the same instant. His blade came up, not toward Yohn Royce as Peter would have wanted, but toward Peter's wrist. Steel clanged. Peter's dagger skittered across marble, ringing loudly as it spun. For a heartbeat, the hall froze, shock rippling through every face. Then chaos erupted. Royce guards surged forward, seizing Peter's arms. Peter struggled, not wildly, but with the controlled fury of a man who knew he was losing. His smile was gone now, replaced by cold calculation. "You fools," he hissed. "Do you know what you've done?" Lady Waynwood stepped close, eyes hard. "We have removed a worm," she said. "That is all." Lisa stared, shaking, Robin clinging to her. "No," she whispered. "No, he's." Yohn Royce looked at her with something like sadness. "My lady," he said, "you will be protected, but you will not be protected by him." Peter Baelish's gaze snapped to Lisa, eyes bright and sharp. "Tell them," he urged softly. "Tell them you command it. Tell them to release me." Lisa's mouth opened, her hands trembled. The hall waited, held in the thin air between cliff and fall. Then Robin began to whimper, frightened by the shouting, and Lisa's fear surged. She clutched him tighter and shook her head, sobbing. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't." Peter's expression shifted, just for an instant, into something like contempt. Yohn Royce's voice was firm. "Take him," he ordered, "down to the gates of the moon, under guard. He will answer for himself before the Vale, and before House Stark, if they demand it." Peter Baelish was dragged away, boots scraping on marble, his head held high as if dignity could replace control. As he passed the moon door, his eyes flicked to it once, a silent promise that cliffs were never far from his thoughts. But for the first time in years, Peter Baelish was not holding the rope. The Vale's door had cracked open, and through that crack, war and vengeance were about to pour like cold wine down the mountain paths. They brought Peter Baelish down the mountain in chains, and the Vale felt lighter with every step. At the gates of the moon, the air grew thicker, warmer, easier to breathe. Soldiers who had been children when Jon Arryn ruled watched the former master of coin pass with disbelief in their eyes. Some spat, some only stared. Peter Baelish met their gaze with a cold calm that tried to pretend chains were temporary. Bronze Yohn Royce did not look at him. Yohn looked outward, toward the Vale's roads, toward the bloody gate, toward the realm beyond the mountains that had been ignored for too long. Ravens flew before them, carrying orders stamped with the falcon and crescent moon. The Vale would muster, not for a mad queen, not for a spoiled boy king, for honor murdered at a wedding and for a realm that had been held together by Arryn patience once and might be held together again by Arryn steel. When the Vale host rode out, it looked like winter's first storm, quiet at the start, then suddenly everywhere. Knights in polished mail, men-at-arms with spears and shields, banners snapping in the wind at last, freed from thin air, falcons diving on blue, bronze runes, Waynwood green. They rode through the bloody gate and out into the world. At the Trident, Robb Stark waited beneath a sky that threatened rain. His camp spread along the riverbank, wolves and trout banners rippling. Tyrell tents stood nearby, green cloth and golden roses, their men drilling with crisp discipline. The Riverlands lords camped in smaller clusters, some still watching the Tyrells as if expecting betrayal to bloom again. When the Vale riders appeared on the horizon, the camp stirred like a beast waking. Men climbed onto wagons, squinting. Scouts returned at a gallop, faces alight. "The Vale," they shouted. "The Vale is coming." Catelyn Stark walked to the edge of the camp with her cloak pulled tight. Her heart hammered against her ribs in a way she had not felt since childhood. Hope, sharp and painful. She had dreamed of her sister's banners for so long that she had begun to believe they were only dreams. The first banners crested the rise. Falcon and moon, bright against the darkening sky. Then more bronze runes, red stones, green Waynwoods. A mass of cavalry, disciplined and fresh, moving like a single creature. Bronze Yohn Royce rode at their head, helm under his arm, face stern. Beside him rode Lady Anya Waynwood, eyes sharp. Horton Redfort followed, mouth set. And behind them, on a mule cart under heavy guard, sat Peter Baelish in chains. Robb Stark stepped forward, face unreadable. Ser Loras Tyrell stood at his side, watching with wary curiosity. Ser Garland Tyrell's gaze sharpened on the chained man like a blade recognizing an old enemy. Catelyn Stark's breath caught. For a moment she saw Peter as a boy again, thin, eager, bleeding in Riverrun's yard. Then she saw the man he had become, smiling through tragedy, slipping through cracks, leaving ruin behind him like perfume. Peter lifted his head, eyes finding Catelyn. His mouth tried to form a smile. Catelyn's face did not soften. She looked at him as she would look at a snake found in a child's bed. Yohn Royce dismounted and bowed stiffly to Robb. "Your Grace," he said. The words sounded strange in his Vale accent, as if the Vale had forgotten the taste of calling anyone king. Robb's gaze held him. "Lord Royce," he replied. "I did not expect you." Yohn's eyes did not flinch. "We shamed ourselves by staying behind mountains," he said. "We will not be shamed again by staying silent while guest right is murdered and the realm is sold." Robb nodded slowly. "Then you have my thanks," he said, "and my respect." Lady Waynwood stepped forward, holding out a bundle of parchments sealed with the falcon. "We bring proof," she said, "and we bring the man the letters named." Horton Redfort's voice was blunt. "Peter Baelish," he said, spitting the name like bitter wine. He tried to draw steel at the Eyrie. Ser Lyn Corbray stopped him. "He is ours, but his crimes touch more than the Vale." Catelyn's hands clenched at her sides. "They touch my family," she whispered. Robb's gaze slid to Peter, cold. "They touch my crown," he said. Peter's voice was soft, controlled, as if he were still in a council chamber. "Your Grace," he began. "I believe there has been silence, Ser Loras Tyrell said sharply, and the force in his voice surprised even him. The memory of a feast hall turning red still lived in his bones, and Peter's mouth looked like the mouth of that betrayal. Robb Stark stepped closer to the cart, eyes fixed on Peter. "You will speak," he said, "when I decide you may. Until then, you will breathe because it is useful that you breathe." Peter swallowed, smile dying. Catelyn stared at him a long moment, then turned away, because looking too long made old wounds ache. Robb lifted his gaze to the Vale banners behind Yon Royce. "If the Vale rides with us," he said, voice carrying, "then the lions are no longer hunting lambs. They are hunting wolves. Wolves with roses at their flanks and falcons in the sky." A low rumble of approval moved through the gathered men. River lords, Northmen, Reach knights, Vale soldiers. Banners rippled together in the wind, colors mingling. In the distance, thunder growled. Robb Stark looked south, toward King's Landing and the boy king who still laughed with a crossbow. "Let Tywin Lannister hear this song," he said quietly. "Let him hear it and know the realm will not be butchered in silence." Behind him, Peter Baelish sat in chains, eyes narrowed, already searching for a crack. But for now, the crack belonged to wolves and roses and falcons. And the war, denied its neat ending, began again, larger, louder, and watched by a realm that could no longer pretend it had not heard the scream.